This German soldier had to run several kilometers every time he needed to urinate, not because he lacked confidence in his manhood, but because he had been circumcised at birth. Since German experts had many methods to identify Jews, first using calipers to measure the bridge of the nose, then using color charts to compare eyes. Although these methods were quite effective, on the actual battlefield, the German army had developed an even more efficient method, which was to pull down pants and check for circumcision. Once identity was confirmed, they would be sent to prison. Mike among the prisoners was terrified because he was Jewish. To save his own life, he removed his red scarf and buried it along with his identity documents in the ground. When questioned by the German soldiers, he spoke in fluent German, claiming he was a German from a Soviet orphanage who had been held captive by the Soviets all along and was now finally rescued. The soldiers couldn't immediately determine if this was true, so they brought him before the captain, saying the boy was a diamond in the rough. Facing the captain's interrogation, Mike repeated his tragic life story. When asked about his parents' names, Mike froze. He didn't know what names to give his parents. At that moment, the officer in charge of registration said, since he grew up in an orphanage, his parents must have been killed by the Soviets. Asking such questions was like rubbing salt in his wounds. Mike immediately put on a sorrowful expression. The captain, seeing this, quickly began comforting Mike. Just then, several Soviet officers refused to be inspected. Mike, fluent in Russian, was immediately called over to translate. Surprisingly, this Soviet officer turned out to be Stalin's son. The soldiers were shocked. Not daring to handle him carelessly, the officer cursed Mike for betraying his own people, but fortunately the Germans couldn't understand, and instead kept protecting the boy. Then they took the boy back to the military camp, and made him work as a translator. The soldiers greatly appreciated this talent, bringing him plenty of food. Just as he took a bite, he heard someone calling his name. It was Mike's classmate from the orphanage, who wanted to expose him as a Jew, but the Germans couldn't understand. They could only ask Mike to translate. Mike lied that he was insulting the German army, and gave him a slap in the face. This simple and brutal behavior was greatly appreciated by the Germans. But on this very day, while the boy was bathing, a German soldier suddenly burst in and discovered his secret of being Jewish. Mike was terrified, immediately falling to his knees begging for mercy. Perhaps feeling a connection with Mike, the veteran didn't expose him, instead constantly comforting him not to be afraid. Thus the two became the best of friends, and Mike felt a long-lost warmth. However, during one battle, they captured a Soviet telephone. His teammates wanted to obtain intelligence from it, but didn't know what the Soviets were saying, so they asked Mike to translate, but suddenly several teammates were shot dead one after another. Even the only veteran who had been kind to him died. Facing this desperate situation, Mike collapsed on the ground at a loss, but soon, a bold idea began to form in his mind.